Attention, attention, les Allemands arrivés, ils ne sont pas amicaux. Ah, merde alors. Which is, of course, French for Achtung, Achtung. The Germans are coming, they are not friendly. Expletive added. We're recording this show in the week that marks the 80th anniversary of the Blitzkrieg, which of course saw German troops smash their way into Holland and Belgium on their way to ultimately occupying France, in probably the most stunning victory of the Second World War, apart from when the Allies win at the end. Welcome to We Have Ways of Making You Talk.
You've just had your birthday, Al, haven't you? 10th of May. What a day! What a day!
Yes,
to have
I know.
A birthday. The day that Churchill becomes Prime Minister, the day that the Germans launch their attack on the West. You know, that's really good.
No one used to care, but finally I found an environment where people do give a shit about that.
I'm really impressed. That's
right. And my sister and I share a birthday. My older sister and I are both on May the 10th. So she gets Churchill, I get Fal Gelb. Anyway, welcome. Welcome to We Have Ways of Making You Talk. Last Friday, of course, we were talking about VE Day, and now proving that we may be the least linear podcast in the brief history of this blossoming frontier of a medium. We're talking about the event which really marks the start of Britain's full-scale involvement in the Second World War. In fact, Nick Geraghty on Twitter responded to our suggestion over the weekend that we planned this as a talking point with the following pithy observation. This is going to be exhausting. On Friday we'd won it, but now we're straight into the prequels.
Well, he's got a point. He's got a point, hasn't he? Because I mean,
it's like Star Wars,
the anniversaries come
order.
Thick and fast. I mean, we've just got through V Day. Now it's 80th of Fal Gelb and Dunkirk and the Battle of Britain. Then quickly we put the Battle of Britain on hold again while we go back to VJ Day in 1945. And then we forget all the 75th anniversaries because they've gone, and we're back to full-on 80th.
The thing is, I mean, one thing it tells you is that there's a lot of summer campaigning in the Second World War, doesn't it?
The old campaigning season.
All falling around one another. Yeah,
well, exactly. The problem is when you're kind of hyper-mechanised like the Allies were, trying to do it in winter, in mud, it doesn't really work so well. Yeah. The old rules still hold firm.
The old rules. They haven't got to go home for the harvest like in the proper old days.
That is true. That is true.
Now, James, how was your weekend? I mean, because we did a fair bit of punting. We Have Ways, didn't we, on various media as well?
Yeah, we did that. And you were talking to Angela Rippon. Not that I've heard it, but I heard there was a little bit of piss taking going on. That's fine. And then we had a chat with Adrian Charles, didn't we, on the radio and Channel 4 and Matt Fry and is Boris Chamberlain or is he Churchill? That was all quite good. So it was all good fun. But how was your VE Day 75 weekend? Did you enjoy it? Did you have flags out?
Yeah, we did it. We did actually. We made some toddler bunting, some toddler manufactured bunting, which we put out, and there were Union Jacks in the street, which is quite interesting because I don't know. I think the sort of combination of being under lockdown and then having a big anniversary is kind of weird, isn't it? I mean, obviously we didn't do any congering or anything. No. I mean, but that was the thing we kept being asked, didn't we? At the weekend is like, where does the current crisis marry up with the war and all that sort of thing? How do they reflect upon one another? It is interesting. It is interesting that that's what everyone. I mean, maybe it's because VE Day's in the air, but everyone wants to compare the two, don't they? They really, really do.
Well, I've got to say, in my village, there was they were going to have this sort of big ceremony at 3:00, and then they asked my mate Pete, who can play the bagpipes. They said, "Well, look, we're going to cancel that, but could you come and do a number?" So he did Amazing Grace on the bagpipes at the War Memorial, and actually a hell of a lot of people came out, and I'm not sure there was that much social distancing going on. Then another village up the road, they had an outdoor kind of street party 2 meters apart, but everyone just got pissed as far as I can make out. Not that I saw it, but I saw photos. And then, but it was a lovely atmosphere actually on Friday. I thought, it was sort of. I watched about 10 minutes of Vera Lynn, and it's. The sun was shining, the flags were out. It was
we were directly under the red arrows out in Chiswick Park on Friday morning, whenever it was, like 9:30.
No, you never get bored of that, do you?
Well, no, but it's quite interesting because where I live, you look out my office window, there's normally a plane going by down into Heathrow, right? So obviously we've got used to the fact that There aren't any, and I haven't yet reached the point of pointing at planes and going iron bird in sky. I haven't got there yet, but I'm heading that way, right? But one thing that Eleanor, my partner, the other day said is she said, "Oh, there's a plane going by," and I thought, "Gosh, isn't that noisy?" Right? So I'm like, okay, so the noise is, because they're so rare, the noise is becoming more of a thing. So when we're out walking, I hear the red arrows and I think, gosh, he's right. The planes are much more noticeably noisy, aren't they? Now that they're less frequent. And then, of course, 9 fucking hawks go over. The smoke. All right, it's a red arrows. It's not an Airbus. Anyway, I mean, yeah.
Well, I tell you what, I sat. I made my 12-year-old daughter. She didn't thank me for it at all. Sit down and watch Diary for Timothy, which I've been waxing lyrical about. The Humphrey Jennings film, and actually, it was really, really good, and it was actually even better than I remembered. And you'll love it because it starts off at he's born on the 17th of September, 1944. And it's sort of, you were born as the planes were heading over towards a new battle in Holland. And it's read by Michael Redgrave on a script by Ian Forster. So, it's
Jeepers.
It's properly good.
They had the A-team on that,
and what is really interesting is it's the vision for the Britain that follows. So it's quite political, but it's really really interesting.
Did you hear John Waddy on the Today programme on Friday morning?
No, I didn't. But I've got So I interviewed him all day on in 2013, and I've got that. I've got to get the film footage off Maya Vision, who filmed it. But I've got the interview, and he was just fantastic. So what was he saying on the Today programme?
Well, it was Nick Robinson, and so they start off with what are your feelings about VE Day? And he goes, well, of course, I was in a Stalag Luft, I was in a prisoner of war camp, and we got let out. He said, all I wanted is get home, and then we're sent to the RAF, but the RAF can't get us home because they've been enjoying themselves too much on VE Day. So basically, all the air crews were pissed. So he didn't get to go home. And he said, I can't remember the word he used, but basically we were a lot cooler headed about this whole thing at the time. And then they talked about Market Garden, and he says, well, it was a daring operation. It was worth it at the time because if we'd have ended the war, we'd have saved millions of lives.
Bang on. And you're like,
we can't argue with that, and that's interesting as well because he what was he? He was
company commander. He's the last surviving company.
That's
commander.
right. He's a major. He's one of the majors. So, exactly. So he's got no skin in the game for the responsibility for how the idea, the concept, has he? It's not like a general covering his arse. Because you might, if you had Urquhart on, he'd probably go, well, of course the risk was worth it, but in the end we didn't. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right? So to hear someone
he's a perfect rank and position to make a considered judgment on this.
Yeah. And then he talks about being the advisor on A Bridge Too Far, and the producer Joseph Levine taking to one side and saying, so basically he'd gone to Dickie Attenborough and gone, there's stuff in this is completely inaccurate. And Attenborough had gone to Joseph Levine and said, the Colonel's got his concerns. And Levine apparently said, tell the Colonel that I make money from making movies, not from making history. And you're like, okay, fair enough. But
if
then
only other Hollywood filmmakers were so honest.
Well, yeah, exactly. But then he gets into this thing. At the end of the interview, he says, the bond that formed between us and the people of Arnhem as a result of the battle was a special thing. And then I'll admit it got very dusty in my kitchen when he said, and it stayed with me to this day that we failed and we let them down. And you're like, mate, God, you didn't fail anyone, Anyway, so that's well worth a listen.
There's only one man who failed them.
Well, exactly. And that's at about 7:41 on last Friday's VE Days Today.
Okay, I'll have a listen to that. He was so delightful. I met. It sounds rather seedy. I met him in a hotel near Taunton, but but I did. Do you
remember the days when you could meet people in hotels near Taunton? God, they were the good old days, weren't they?
So I interviewed him myself first, and then we went back and filmed him, and because there was talk about doing a doc for the BBC, and so we just thought, let's just get it in the bag. And he was just brilliant. He's just got this. He's got this sort of slightly aquiline nose, and he's got these sort of piercing eyes, and he's got this face which is sort of wonderfully walnutty with age. But boy, was he sharp! I mean, he was fantastic. He was utterly charming. His sort of, ever so often you used to in my experience you'd get these veterans. Tom Neal, the fighter pilot, was one of those.
Yeah.
Who not only had a very clear memory, but also, with the passage of time, had properly analysed his experiences and could contextualise his experiences into the bigger picture, which makes them just invaluable because actually he can look at this with a kind of objectivity. I mean, there's lots of people who flew in the Battle of Britain, for example, who just, they still, to their dying day, we're talking about, we were outnumbered, the few, it was a close run thing, all this kind of stuff, because of what they've read afterwards. You never get that with Tom, and you wouldn't get that with John Waddy either. John was always this sort of incredibly, is prescient the right word in his approach to it? It was just fantastic. Yeah. But the other thing I've been doing this weekend is reading The Good Shepherd by C.S. Forrester, he of Hornblower fame. I've never even heard of this book before. But apparently it's the inspiration for the new Tom Hanks movie called
The Greyhound.
So the premise is it's sometime in 1942. I can't quite work out when. The main protagonist, the whole thing is told through the point of view of this guy called Commander George Krause. And Krause is an American destroyer captain, and he is the comm escort. So he's the commander of the escort of 4 escorts of this transatlantic convoy. And it's his first transatlantic convoy anyway. And he is only in command through dint of seniority of rank and age.
Right.
So he's been completely tested, and it's winter, and it's miserable, and it's freezing cold. And it's this 36-hour period where he's got to marshal and to get the convoy through this screen of the wolf pack. And it is absolutely fantastic. The attention to detail is second to none. So at the end of this, you absolutely know what it was like being a destroyer captain on the Atlantic convoys. The limitations of what they've got, what they can do, the kind of this promise of improved science and technology just around the corner. The constant decisions he has to make all the time. It's a calculation in terms of distances and time and all the rest of it, but also calculations in terms of what will that suggest to the other 3 escorts if I do this. Every word he says in his comms with the other escorts, with his subordinate officers on the ship, everything has a layer, everything has a meaning. So
he's weighing absolutely everything.
Absolutely everything, and he's just on his feet the whole time. So while everyone else is on watch and he's considered it, he is on his feet for 36 hours, and he's absolutely shattered. I mean, he's 42 years old. He's completely shattered. He's not eating enough. He's not feeling enough. His legs are aching. His brain's got to keep focused, and he's constantly playing this cat and mouse with these U-boats. And he's just, suddenly someone says, they see a periscope, and he literally gets a nanosecond on it, and then it's gone. Yeah. You've then got to second guess what that U-boat commander is also thinking. What is he going to do? And it's just amazing. We don't do enough on the Battle of the Atlantic here, because I keep saying it's the most important theatre of the Second World War, which I really genuinely believe.
Well, it is the mega battle of the Second World War, isn't it?
It's the mega battle. It's just amazing.
The problem in a way with the Battle of the Atlantic is it's so vast, so long that it's basically 1939 to 1945. It's basically the length of the war, and arguably the Second World War. I know that with VE Day there was an awful lot of everyone's forgotten the Russians, and you think, well, I expect if you go to Russia and you check out they maybe have forgotten the Allies, but whatever. But the Battle of the Atlantic is the mega battle of the Second World War. The mega campaign, and the one that whoever wins that essentially decides the war. They might not win it straight away, but they decide what's going to happen long term, don't they? Because the Battle of the Atlantic impinges on the Northwest Europe campaign, the African campaign, the Italian campaign, the campaign in the Far East, actually. Everything. It's the one mega campaign, isn't it? but there's no battle. It's not like Jutland where the two navies square off and the fact there's no decision is the deciding factor. You know what I mean? There's no grand encounter, and obviously the mind is drawn, and the way history's been written, and the way wars used to be fought, you'd have these big, giant mega encounters, wouldn't you? That would last a day.
Yeah.
And that would decide things. But in fact, there's no. The Battle of the Atlantic is this decisive battle, but it doesn't fit into an afternoon, which is what people.
Yeah, and also there's no beach and got a battered concrete to go and look at either. You could paddle off to the western approaches, and even if you were feeling really bold, you could row all the way to the mid-Atlantic. But when you got there, you just go, convoy HX-77. Yeah, that was a tough one.
Yeah,
and then you kind of turn around and paddle back again, wouldn't you?
The walking the ground isn't quite. Unless you're strolling on the deck of a cruise ship, and that is something I will never do. I'm never going on a cruise.
But if someone said to me,
"Hey,
great news! I've just found a Corvette. Fancy going across the Atlantic in it in winter?" I'd go, "Hell yeah!" Come on, of course you would. It would be awful, and that's the whole point.
I'd talk to you on Zoom. Anyway, how's it going, James? It's awful. I've been on my feet for 36 hours.
No, I want to experience the cruel sea. Obviously, I don't want to fall overboard and drown, but I do want to experience the cruel sea. I want to know what it was like.
Well, so when's this movie? Is this movie getting a conventional release? Because that's the other thing.
Well, I don't know.
It says how they release films, aren't they?
Don't know. Latest thing I've heard is it's coming out on the 12th of June, but whether that, obviously not into cinemas near you.
Well, they might stick it straight up on a streaming thing, which is what they've been doing with some films. Anyway, there have been some amusing examples of people with no interest in the subject. And imagine that, having no interest in this subject. Who are these schmucks? No interest in this subject whatsoever, trying to get involved. Many of you have seen the valiant attempt on Twitter of a young woman who listened to my reading of Zeno's The Cauldron. And
oh my God, this is so funny.
And we've some news about Zeno's The Cauldron that will be on the live cast on Thursday night, 8:30 p.m.
Exciting news.
Over on the Patreon. Some exciting news. Anyway, she was listening to the reading of The Cauldron in an attempt to find common ground with her other half. Now, here's a lesson in the dangers of mission creep, I fear. This is an exchange between Daisy and her other half, and she writes as an explanation, "I can't say for sure the other half enjoyed me trying to take an interest. Here's her WhatsApp exchange." Now, I'm going to, if I'm talking forcefully, it's because it's caps, okay? "I won't learn about people parachuting into Arnhem. I won't be a patriot if that's what you want. I don't know what the Spandau are either. I thought it was a place. This is all nonsense to me. Scruffy Butcher just killed a man but is now gravely injured and I've got no fucking idea how many men are left because I don't know what a company is. Or a platoon. For fuck's sake, when did a platoon become involved? This is bollocks. I hope they lose. Who are the Bosch? Are we the Bosch? Now a glider's on fire and the section need to deal with it. What's a fucking section? This is an absolute nightmare." To which OH replies, "A company is like a squadron. A platoon is like a troop. The Germans are the Bosch. Spandau are machine guns. Why have I assumed you're..." She's back. "Why have you assumed I remember what a squadron is? Spandau is where they make them. Because I'm in a... And here we go. Because I'm in a squadron?" A section is a third of a platoon commanded by a corporal. I don't know who you are. A man is burning to death in a glider. That's most sad. He's dead now. So,
so brilliant.
It's brilliant. More book reviews should be like that, I think. I think if the book's page in the Sunday Times was like that, I'd buy more.
I've got to say, at the moment, I'm going through the copy edits of Sicily. And it's actually clear that my poor copy editor has got in a complete tangle about which is... So, is it 3rd Fallschirmjäger or 1st Fallschirmjäger? Is this part of the 1st Division or what? And then they're getting really confused about kind of, whether it's a machine gun platoon or battalion or whatever. Anyway, so I keep sort of patiently saying no. 3rd Fallschirmjäger Regiment, that's Ludwig Harman's one, remember? And obviously she can't. And anyway, it's all getting a bit... What can you do?
The perils, eh? The perils of writing.
Yeah. But that is just brilliant. I absolutely love that. I laughed my head off when I first read that. Not literally, obviously, but I did.
Very strong.
Laugh a lot. Yeah.
Now, of course, well, I'll tell you what. We're going to take a very short break, and then we're going to deal with some of your questions. Marking Falgelb. In fact, we're going to call a halt order right now. Stop the tanks. Time for a break. Welcome back. We hope you enjoyed your break and used it fruitfully. I mean, I'm finding one of the things about working from home is that lots of people are discovering that you can go to the toilet and do what would be a job-ending crap in the comfort of your own home. I mean, well, that's what people don't know about working from home, is you can spend an awfully long time in the toilet and no one cares. Someone sent me this, or gave me this, a couple of years ago, Secrets and Stories of the War, which is a 2-volume Reader's Digest compendium.
Oh, yeah, I've got that.
Of little accounts. The Eben Mal bit. It's only 4 pages. Where he says the gliders aren't the thing. It's the fact that they're sort of storm engineers. That's the actual key to it, which is really, really interesting. And it's lots and lots of reportage journalism written at the time. So that's what I sit on the toilet for 45 minutes and leaf through. Anyway, welcome back.
I can understand that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the advantage of working from home, ladies and gentlemen. Our podcast postal service is flat out trying to answer everyone. I remain astonished that we've had the response we have had to the podcast. I mean, we're obviously enjoying ourselves, but when other people are enjoying it as well, that's a very, very cool thing. And we're also trying to deliver more and more additional and extra and fascinating content. And so what we've got for you on Thursday, Thursday's special edition, and then the week after, the following Thursday,
our this special
is good. Guest is so good. Is the writer and lawyer Philippe Sands, author of The Rat Line and East West Street. I promise you that you'll enjoy that conversation. We had a
fantastic, wasn't it?
I mean, dear listener, you know what it's like when James and I can't shut up. Well, add a third person who also has a similar problem. To the mix, and it goes on forever. But I mean, his grappling with the issues that those books raise, and talking about basically the culture within top end Nazism is absolutely fascinating. And then the ramifications and the knock-ons and what happens in the Cold War that follows, and where he's going with that idea and where it's taking him, or that history is really, really fascinating.
Oh God, it was just amazing, wasn't it? And it's the eternal question: why did they do it? How did so many people become Nazis? And I've got to say, it's about the closest I've ever got to getting an answer. It was just fantastic.
Yeah, no, it's really good. And if you've heard The Rat Line, it was that peculiar thing of where you've heard someone's voice, you've sat with someone's voice for like several hours, and then there they are talking to you, and it's like, I'm inside the, that really, really, really peculiar thing sometimes you have when you think you know someone, and there they are talking about the subject that they've talked to you about before. So we recommend that Thursday and the following Thursday. It's really, really, really good. And of course, Thursday night is our live stream, 8:30. Anyway. Questions about Blitzkrieg, it says here in front of me. Now we've got lots of these, and we're going to try to rattle through them in the manner of the sharp end of Falgelb itself. Bob Joylove, which I think is probably his porn name. How reliant was Blitzkrieg on higher level commander control, or was it the skills of German tactical commanders that made it potent? Well, I think how. Let's say, how reliant was Blitzkrieg on high-level command and control in the French army? I think the answer to that is entirely, because after all, it's high-level command and control in the French army that falls it doesn't even fall to pieces. It's not existent in the first place, and that's why books about. I mean, I dug them all up. That's why books about this battle are called To Lose a Battle. That's why they're called Strange Victory, because that's exactly what happens. Arguably, exactly what happens. It's 50-50.
Yes. It's 50-50. 50 German brilliance, 50% total crapness of the French. It just is. I mean, the thing about, what they're talking about here is what Bob Joylov is talking about is German tactical commanders, isn't he? He's talking about the German level.
Yes, I know.
First of all, there is no concept of Blitzkrieg in the German army at this time. Okay, that is a term that is coined by an American journalist in the autumn of 1939. It is not a doctrine.
It's not a political notion. It's not a strategic doctrine. It's not tactical either. In fact, it's actually weirdly a byproduct of all three, where they've got themselves the gum tree that the Germans have got themselves up by mid 1939, basically, isn't it? Economically,
but it's also Bewegungskrieg, which is really what it is: the means of fighting in a fast operational level. And this is something they've been doing for centuries. It goes all the way back to Frederick the Elector, Frederick the Great. They certainly were trying to do it in 1870. They were certainly trying to do it in 1914. Nothing has changed. And this all goes back to the point that Germany is resource poor. It's stuck in the middle of Europe. It doesn't have access to the world's oceans in the way that Britain does, for example, or even France. So if it's going to take on a war, it's got to make sure it wins really quickly. So what you do is you have a massive especially
if it's considering fighting on two fronts,
right?
Which of course they are considering. I mean, for all this, Hitler's biggest mistake.
Yes, but they're trying to do it one at a time.
He always
one at a time.
Well, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So the idea is you hit very hard your main point of impact, so that where you do hit, you do have an overwhelming superiority in strength and force.
Yeah.
You then do a thing called the Kattelschlag, which is the cauldron war, which is basically an encirclement, and you annihilate your enemy. And you do all that really, really quickly. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. So if you go back historically, 1864 against Austria, it worked really well. 1866 against Denmark, it worked really, really well. 1870 against France, it worked pretty well, but then they ran out of steam. 1914, it doesn't work. But in 1939, 1940, they're trying to do exactly the same thing. There is absolutely nothing pioneering and new about von Manstein's plan at all. What is different is the means by which the spearhead is operating, with the Luftwaffe up front as a tactical air force offering close air support, and these 16 mechanised divisions out of the 135 that are being used. And the key thing about a panzer division, and it's really important everyone understands this, is that a panzer division is not a division stuffed full of panzers. It is an all-arms mechanised combined arms force. So you've got motorised reconnaissance forces, you've got motorised infantry, motorised artillery and tanks. You've got cool people in BMWs and sidecars, motorbikes. They've all got radios, so they can all communicate with each other. That is the pioneering aspect of Blitzkrieg, and so it is an update of a previous conceived. But also,
those previous examples you gave us, Austria didn't have it. I mean, one of the things that the Germans, when they do a quick war, what they have in common is enemies who are either completely asymmetric, or so Denmark, Poland in 39. It's either completely asymmetric, or it's that the other side, the opponent, hasn't got their act together.
Yeah.
And if there's one thing the French and the Allies, because after all, it's I know that it's preponderantly a French campaign, the Battle of France, but the French don't have their act together. And if they talk a lot about the Germans get inside the Allied decision loop, as it were. So the Allies, the French are always responding to what happened the day before yesterday and can't get their message out until tomorrow. So you've got this decision loop problem. But the tactical skill, the German tactical level, they're shit hot, these people, and they have a unity of purpose and concentration of force. But it's nothing new, but it's Wagner, isn't it? It's old wine in new bottles.
Yeah, I mean, I just view Guderian as the daddy of the Blitzkrieg, not von Manstein, in my humble opinion. So from the very quickly, just on to answer the sort of higher level or the tactical level, what is absolutely clear is there's lots of high level German commanders who do not get it, who do not understand it,
they haven't a clue.
Who think they are absolutely walking into disaster. It is really a handful of divisions and a handful of next peg down commanders who get it. And they are driving forward the Blitzkrieg and pioneering this new methodology.
Well, yes, Jamie McTrusty. Do you think the campaign in France was Rommel's finest hour during the war? He certainly displayed daring and made a name for himself, but got a nasty shock with the Arras counterattack. Well, there is that school of thought that says, Rommel after that is over promoted, basically. That that's his level.
I don't know. I'd have thought the fall of Tobruk's quite high up there, isn't it?
Yeah,
capture Tobruk on the 21st of June.
I think taking Tobruk is Rommel's finest hour. But there's certainly, he cut a dash and he knew how to let people know that he'd cut a dash as well, didn't he? But that's all.
Talking the Arras counterattack, though, what is really interesting about that is you can stand on the farm, on the hill, on the ridge line, south west of Arras, and you can marry up where you're standing with an old black and white photograph of the knocked out and unused 88mm, which he brings in and knocks out all those British Valentines and things and Matildas, and it is incredibly atmospheric. And when you stand on that little ridge line, suddenly I know I've said it before, but when you walk the ground there, you really, really can. It all start making sense. It's really, really interesting. It's a great place to visit.
Appears, doesn't it? James Goodroll asks, is it true that France had better tanks than Germany during the Blitzkrieg? If so, were the French tank crews not as well trained as the Germans, or was the superiority of German tanks and tank troops just victor propaganda? Well, this raises an interesting point, doesn't it? Because it arguably the Allies had better tank types than the Germans did, but it's kind of not the point. It's what you do. It's what you do with them. And so if you go to Normandy in 1944, the Germans had better tanks than the Allies had, is the standard thing. Yeah, maybe they did, but just like in 1940, the people with the better tanks lost. So
there's a great tank battle of Denay-Flavion on the 15th of May 1940.
Yep.
And what happens is, on that morning, the French 1st Armoured Division, which is the corps d'élite of the French army, has 176 tanks, of which a number of them are the big Charbis, which are the biggest armoured, heaviest, got 75mm gun, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, it looked like
by the end of that day, by dusk that night, they have 36 left. And by 11 o'clock the following morning, they've got 16. And you think, well, hang on a minute, how could that possibly happen? Because the German 7th and 5th Panzer Divisions are equipped with these Czech tanks and Panzer 1s and Part 2s. They can't possibly defeat, a Char-B. How can that be? So what's happening is a bunch of Panzer 2s are kind of emerging through the woods and literally sticking their tongue out and waggling their fingers at the Char-Bs, who then slowly, deliberately clank and grind their way round towards them. The Panzer IIs then disappear into the wood again. 2 minutes later, the anti-tank guns open up and blow them to pieces, blow the French planks to pieces. So it is the anti-tank guns rather than the tanks that are causing all the damage. And the reason that's able to happen is because they've got radios and they can all communicate with one another, which is what the French don't have. So that's the big thing. What you're looking at actually is, rather than the tank crews not as well trained as the Germans, it's basically it's what you're doing tactically that is delivering your strategic outcome. Is the thing here, isn't it? So the Germans have got it worked out tactically. It's comms. And it's, exactly. Yeah. Okay, Brian Williams asks, was Lord Gort right to pull the BEF back to the Channel ports? Could the situation have been retrieved if he'd, instead combined with the French for their planned counterattack? Well, he kept trying to combine with the French for a planned counterattack, and it wasn't forthcoming, is the problem. He had no option but to withdraw to the Channel ports because he'd been flanked, and he didn't want to get caught in the Kesselschlacht. Like, he didn't want to get encircled. Well, I'm sorry, but, when the Belgians on your left... When the Belgians on the left and the 55 French division on your right are falling back, you've got no choice but to fall back in line, or else you're going to end up dead. Then, big counterattack is such a shower. It's not true. And I think it is just worth just sort of explaining why this happens. So why is it that the French can't do this? And it's because they're very top heavy in their command structure. So you've got Gamelin at the very top. Then you've got, or you have until the 23rd of May when Weygand takes over. Then you've got the army groups of the north. Then you've got armies. Then you've got corps. Then you've got divisions, brigades, all the rest of it. Yeah. The problem is, because they don't have good radio communication, and because Stukas are coming over and blowing up telephone lines, they're dependent on dispatch riders half the time. And so dispatch riders get sent off at kind of 6 a.m. And then what happens is they're on a road which is chogged with refugees. They can't then get anywhere. Anyway, so what then happens is they send off a dispatch rider at 6 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
He hasn't reappeared by 12, so they then send another one off. He eventually comes back at 9 o'clock that night, by which time everything has changed. And of course, that process has to go down the chain from army group to army to corps to division to everything. And so the net result is they're unable to do anything. They are rabbits in headlights. They're absolutely stuck. And so the Germans are able to defeat them in isolation, in penny packets. And that's what happens.
You've also got, the French army and the German army at this point, they're very different entities, aren't they? The British have maintained an army to police their empire, which is why, of course, it's so sort of weirdly tactically disparate and trained, and it's why it always takes a little while for the British to shake down and figure out how to win in each theatre, because they have a kind of no size fits all approach to training, and it's left to the divisional commanders to figure out what to do. The French army has decided, well, we're a great big standing army to protect our eastern border, and they've got imperial things to do too, but they've got this poilu thing that you're gonna defend from Switzerland to the Belgian border. That's what you're going to do. The German army has been underground. It's been secret. It's been looking for answers. It's been intellectually motivated by the scarcity it's having to operate under, and then suddenly being given a lot of limelight. So it's tied up politically with modernity. The French army is commanded by septuagenarians, octogenarians even. Ancient, crusty people left over from who were old during the previous war. I mean, the fact that these generals are in their 70s in the Second World War means that they
Weygand is 74. He's 74.
Yeah. It's not like he's one of the young blades who's pushed his way through. He's obviously an established guy. So you've got a completely culturally in French, and of course the French after the war spent an awfully long time going, Christ, how did that happen to us? How did we let that happen? Where did we go wrong? And a big part of it is the army's. It's not just that it's committed to a static defence; it's static culturally, isn't it? And
Pétain starts. He joins the army in 1887. 1887.
Probably thinking, how do we win it? How on earth do we stop Sedan in 1870 happening again? Isn't he? That's what he's thinking.
Yeah,
he's
just unbelievable.
Joined an army that's figuring that problem out. So yes, I mean, Lord Gort was absolutely right to pull back. And then finally, Kern O'Neill asks, counterfactual, what effect would the Michelin incident not occurring have had on German and Allied plans? The Michelin incident, for those that don't know, it's not a man made of rubber tyres stealing plans of the German. It's Michelin, a place in Belgium where a German aircraft crashed with the plans for the Western offensive, the German Western offensive, the original plans, which
was boring and kind of same old. It's basically the 1914 plan again.
Yeah.
I.e. approach through the Low Countries.
Schlieffen plan with tanks. Yeah. But not even a full Schlieffen, because of course the 1914 isn't the full Schlieffen, which is arguably why some people think it doesn't work. But and so the Allies go, great. The Allies see this, and this.
That's what we've been thinking anyway.
Well, in A Bridge Too Far, of course, there's that scene where they find the plans in the glider with Holland written on them, and just in case you were wondering what was happening in the movie, Holland and Arnhem. And this is an intelligence coup for the Allies, but the Germans go, oh bollocks, we're going to have to think again. They actually do respond to it, and that's where it's that go away, come back with a better idea, an alternative comes.
Let's go through the Ardennes.
I think. Yeah, and I think if the Michelins, I do actually think if it hadn't happened, you may have remained. The German High Command may never have occurred to them to take action on changing the plan, because they kind of have to change the plan because of this. So they're open again to do.
Well, there's all sorts of interesting dynamics going on, because Halder, who is in charge of plans, who is the chief of staff of the army, he is actually desperately trying to do a really boring plan, and one that looks like it's going to fail, because he doesn't want to do it. He wants the war to end, and he doesn't want to have to take on the Western powers. And then when he realises there is simply no way back, that they're going to have to do it, he suddenly thinks, well, actually, this wacky plan, although it's of sending Army Group B around the north as a feint to look as though this is the main plan, a la what's discovered at Michelin, and a la the original Schlieffen plan. If they then do send their panzers through the south, through the Ardennes, it's still got a very, very high chance of not working. But it is the only plan where
that could work.
Whereas getting into an attritional kind of, a long attritional war with the Allies won't work. But this plan,
which takes us back,
yellow, which is what it becomes.
Which takes us back to the first question we answered. That then the French basically cooperate with Falgelb.
Yes.
To any French listeners, it's just, we don't mean it. It's just the way we're putting it. We're not having a go at France here, but it is the sheer luck. It's the luck of the devil that the French basically make every decision that the Germans could possibly hope them to make. In the first,
including kind of not noticing
days.
And ignoring the signs. There's lots of people fly over the Ardennes.
Reconnaissance aircraft going over the Ardennes, saying, "Look at all these
It is
tanks."
the biggest gridlock ever in the history of gridlock. I mean, it is absolutely toe to bumper full of, the strike force, and if all the bombers had gone over there, that would have been the end of the war. Reconnaissance pilots are going, I think I've seen lots of German things, and they just go, can't possibly be, they can't go through there.
Yeah.
End of. Ignore that.
That would have been the end of that. Yeah.
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 We have to, one day we are going to have to go out to Sedan and Monthermé and Dinant and all those places and look at it, because every time I go there, I just get cross. You just think, how could they have let this happen? I
mean, the thing is, it's the easiest place to access the river from high ground, shortest distance from Germany. I mean, all the kind of, all the things that if I can work that out.
yeah, we saw that. It's not just that. It's also that the main, there are a number of crossing points at Sedan, but the number one main crossing point, the point where actually Guderian himself crosses, is exactly the same crossing point where the German forces crossed in 1870 and in 1914. Exactly the same point. And opposite that, there are no machine guns, no mines, no bunkers whatsoever. Yeah. Why?
I mean, it's interesting because very often the mistake they made was trying to fight the previous war. Well, no, they didn't even bother doing that. That you've got, like you say, you've got previous actual live examples, and the Germans obviously thinking, well, on one level, the Germans thinking, well, where's this worked before? Oh, yeah. Okay. Anyway, that's it for today. Remember, Philippe Sands is our guest on Thursday, and he was in sparkling form when we caught up with him last week. Really, really sensational stuff we got for you for Thursday. And we're live streaming again on Thursday night. Last week's Second World War quiz went down a storm, so I promise you we'll make it a little easier next time. 2 out of 10, some of you.
And we've also got David Edgerton coming up. Professor David Edgerton we're talking to this week as well, aren't we?
Very exciting, that. Super exciting. Yeah. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.
Cheerio.